It is Friday, August 5, 2016. We're pleased to bring you today's edition of the Government News Brief. Welcome. In the news, 20 community leaders to be trained to aid government's suicide prevention program, government's agricultural diversification program boosted, and an amended motion acknowledging the Rodney Commission of Inquiry report findings passed in the National Assembly. Stay tuned as we bring you the details of these and other stories. Thank you for staying with us. I am Azim Khan, and here now are the details. The efforts to reduce incidences of suicide has been incorporated into the Citizen Security Strengthening Program. Paul McAdam has the details.
Addressing the National Assembly on August 4, Minister of Public Security Kemraj Ramjitan said that as part of Phase 2 of the Citizen Security Strengthening Program, emphasis will be placed on the development of 20 community leaders initially. These leaders will engage in social work to spearhead the fight against suicide amongst vulnerable groups.
The component is already cleared for disbursements, and we are in the process of selecting those 20 community officers right now.
The minister added that efforts to reduce stigmatization, encouragement of help-seeking behavior, increasing mental health, substance abuse treatment services, and facilities for youth education and recreational activities will be undertaken. In addition, he noted that the Guyana Police Force will use its efforts as a component to fight suicide.
There is an instruction out of my ministry that all the divisional commanders and subdivisional superintendents there in charge must have youth groups. It is all over the place now. Mr. Hicken is doing it, Mr. Mansell, right down to Borbis, all of them. And in any event, it is paying off.
The business community has also indicated its willingness to do its part.
I met the business community, Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and they indicated that they are going to help in whatever way, because they realized that if you do not have these recreational facilities and so on, things, not necessarily suicide, but also criminal activities and so on, it's going to obviate because of the fact that they're going to utilize time in relation to the time they have not to do idle things and probably to do the suicide and so on that we have.
On August 6, a suicide helpline was launched which enables trained personnel to begin intervention processes with suicidal persons. The telephone numbers are 592-223-0001, 223-0009, or 600-7896, or 623-4444. Information can also be obtained via the Facebook page Guyana Interagency Suicide Prevention Helpline. The Ministry of Public Security on January 25, 2016 launched its Citizen Security Strengthening Program, which seeks to reduce crime and violence in Guyana over the next 5 years. Financed by the Inter-American Development Bank, the IDB, at a cost of $15 million, the program will utilize resources to address homicide, domestic violence, robbery, and suicide. Paul McAdam, Government News Brief.
Suicide prevention in Guyana continues to be a main priority for the government as the opposition questions curbing the scourge in the National Assembly. Delisa Haynes reports.
The government of Guyana has re-established its commitment towards combating the rise in reported cases of suicide. Minister within the Ministry of Public Health, Dr. Karen Cummins, emphasizes that the coalition government has taken a hands-on approach to deal with the issue.
At the Ministry of Public Health, there is a National Suicide Prevention Plan 2015 to 2020, which is integrated with the National Mental Health Action Plan 2015 to 2020. The National Suicide Prevention Plan will provide the necessary guidance to all sectors, stakeholders, with an aim to effect positive change in the society.
The minister was speaking in the National Assembly in response to the motion by opposition member of Parliament Dr. Vindia Prasad about curbing the rise of suicide cases in 2016. Minister Cummins highlights the number of initiatives which are to be undertaken by the government to reduce the number of suicide cases.
The government has decided that in order to combat the scourge of suicide, a national effort is required, and has therefore engaged in a number of ministries, international donor agencies, non-governmental organizations, faith-based organizations, all the concerned stakeholders to combine their efforts and take affirmative action against suicide in Guyana.
A national task force and interministerial committee has been established which will serve to implement the National Suicide Prevention Action Plan. The Ministry of Public Health has also partnered with other government agencies to monitor access to pesticides and toxic chemicals, which are observed to be the most accessible method of suicide. For Government News Brief, I am Delicia Haynes.
Government's push for the development of agro-processing in its agricultural diversification plan has been boosted, with over 1 dozen youths now in a better position to develop the sector. Details in this report.
Addressing the youths at graduation today, Presidential Advisor on Youth Empowerment Aubrey Norton stated that the program is aimed at empowering young people through training in agro-processing and other disciplines to enable them to become entrepreneurs. This is in keeping with President David Granger's plan that young people should be guided to self-employment since the state alone cannot provide all the jobs. The advisor urged that graduates recognize the value of self-employment.
You must start small, but you must focus on developing into bigger businesses. It is important that we develop into bigger businesses because one of the objectives of this kind of activity is to create employment. So when you become self-employed, you must look to be able to develop a business so that you can employ others.
Permanent Secretary to the Ministry of Agriculture, George Jarvis, whilst urging the graduates to take full advantage of the training received, says he's happy to see youths taking up agriculture.
They mean that you have completed this work. The facilitators are satisfied that you have done sufficient to warrant the certificates that you have. So display it proudly. And lastly, you have to make money from what you do here. This is not for hobby. I know the time and money invested in you is not for hobby. So I would like to see you displaying your work.
Two of the graduates spoke about their training.
I have my own kitchen garden, and to know that you can actually take things that you would normally, alright, if you leave it for a couple of days, you can throw it away. You could actually process it and make a new product also, so it could last a longer time.
Well, we have organizations in our community and willing to share with them what I've learned and put these things what I've learned into practice.
The training program consists of 2 phases. The youths have already completed phase 1, which was the training in agro-processing. During this training, the youths processed and packaged pepper, pawpaw, cherry, and pineapple, among other fruits and vegetables. Phase 2 will commence in February 2017, where youths will be trained in business and managerial skills needed to manage a small business. Paul McAdam for the Government News Brief.
An amended motion acknowledging the Walter Rodney Commission of Inquiry report findings was passed last evening in the National Assembly after 6 hours of debate. Details in this Tiffany Rodius report.
Opposition Chief Whip Gil Teixeira moved a motion during a late-night sitting of the National Assembly in Parliament building on Thursday to have the findings of the Commission of Inquiry on the death in an explosion of the late Dr. Walter Rodney report adopted and the recommendations implemented.
The fact that this report is before this House is a victory for transparency and accountability. Late as it is, delayed as it was, that nevertheless it has presented to the House and to the nation an effort to come to terms with what was one of the most dastardly acts committed against a son of Guyana's soil.
Teixeira argued for the unanimous passing of the motion as it was presented. She notes that the report not only brought closure for the Rodney family, but the enactment of the recommendations of the report would ensure the democratic architecture of the state is protected. However, the government side of the National Assembly refused to accept the motion as carried. Prime Minister Moses Nagamutu, leading the government's debate on the motion, points out that the findings of the report are questionable.
This inquiry was not about what measures the government should take to respect the architecture of a democratic state. This inquiry was not about an analysis of the history of Guyana and trying to situate in that history where we might have done better or where we went wrong. In the midst of that history stands out one person, and that person is Gregory Smith, also known as Cyril Johnson. And that inquiry was, to my mind, seeking to establish whether in fact Gregory Smith murdered Walter Rodney and whether he acted alone or in concert with others.
Nagamutu argued that instead of pursuing where Smith acquired the device that led to Rodney's death or the other theories that arose during the inquiry, the report was diverted to pursue a conclusion leading away from finding a definitive truth of who was responsible for Rodney's death. Meanwhile, Minister of State Joseph Harmon argued that the Commission of Inquiry was a well-planned ploy by the previous administration to deflect attention from the public ills it was facing. Harmon highlights the bias of the terms of reference of the inquiry and appointed commission.
What was contentious about the appointed Commission of Inquiry was the arbitrary and contemptuous approach by the PPP administration in the selection of the commissioners and determination of the terms of reference.
Opposition Member of Parliament Anil Nandlal, in refuting Harmon's arguments, claimed that the Rodney family asked the Ramatar administration to carefully craft the terms of reference of the inquiry.
Two conditions Dr. Patricia Rodney insisted on. One, that she wants no political involvement with any other political party. The second request that she made was that she wanted to see the terms of reference because she wanted it to capture a certain atmosphere.
But Attorney General Basil Williams debunked Nandalal's claim by citing the verbatim report of the inquiry.
Did you object to the participation of the WPA in the setting up of the inquiry? I turn to page 80. Dr. Rodney, I did not object to the participation of the WPA. I did not object to anybody. That's what she said.
More than 6 hours after the debates, the Attorney General moved for amendment of the motion before it was passed. The amendments were unanimously accepted by the government side of the House, and the amended motion was passed by unanimous vote from the government's side. For the Government News Brief, I'm Tiffany Rogers.
Activities for Indigenous Heritage Month 2016 to be centered on protecting the environment and preserving the indigenous culture, advancing government's green agenda. Details in this report.
The Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs today launched Indigenous Affairs Month 2016 at the Umanayana under the theme Our Culture, Earth's Future, Save the Environment, Live the Indigenous Way. Minister of Indigenous Peoples Affairs Sidney Allicock says that the celebrations are aimed at recognizing Amerindian contributions to the green economy. The minister also underscored the reason for land titling for the country's first people.
Giving Indigenous peoples rights to land was a guarantee that forests, which store carbon and contributes to food security, would continue to exist.
Minister within the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, Valerie Garrido-Lowe, says that the celebrations will continue with a traditional interfaith service, games, art exhibition, lectures, tour, Heritage Village, sports and food and craft exhibition, among other annual activities.
As we celebrate this year of Guyana's Jubilee Independence, the organizing committee at the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, headed by Mr. Anil Roberts, have planned numerous exciting activities for the month of September. We are asking all Guyanese to join us as we celebrate portions of our culture.
The month-long celebrations will begin with the interfaith service on Thursday, September 1, 2016 at the Humaniano. For this Government News Brief, Shivani Rambasad reporting.
Those are the reports we covered in today's edition of the Government News Brief. The details of these and other stories can be found on GINA's website. We encourage you to stay updated and subscribe to our website and YouTube channel. All government and other information can be accessed from GINA's website. Remember to join us again on Monday as we bring you another edition of this, the Government News Brief. Thank you for watching and have a safe weekend.